Street, because she was in a doze at last, and heaven was to help any one who bumped her. Now the highly paid specialist who conveys the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Limited from Chicago to Elkhart is something of an autocrat, and he does not approve of being told how to back up to a car. None the less he handled the Constance as she might have been a load of dynamite, and when the crew rebuked him, they did it in whispers and dumb show. "Pshaw!" said the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe men, discussing life later. "We weren't running for a record. Harvey Cheyne's wife, she were sick back, and we didn't want to jounce her. Come to think of it, our running time from San Diego to Chicago was 57 hours 54 minutes. You can tell that to them Eastern way trains. When we're trying for a record, we'll let you know." To the Western man, though this would not please either city, Chicago and Boston are cheek by jowl, and some railroads encourage the delusion. The Limited whirled the Constance into Buffalo and the arms of the New York Central and Hudson River, illustrious magnates with white whiskers and gold charms on their watch chains boarded her here to talk a little business to Cheyne, who slid her gracefully into Albany, where the Boston and Albany completed the run from tidewater to tidewater. Total time 87 hours and 35 minutes, or 3 days, 15 hours and 1/2. Harvey was waiting for them. After violent emotion, most people and all boys demand food. They feasted the returned prodigal behind drawn curtains, cut off in their great happiness, while the trains roared in and out around them. Harvey ate, drank, and enlarged on his adventures all in one breath, and when he had a hand free his mother fondled it. His voice was thickened with living in the open, salt air, his palms were rough and hard, his wrists dotted with the marks of gurry sores, and a fine full flavour of codfish hung round rubber boots and blue jersey. The father, well used to judging men, looked at him keenly. He did not know what enduring harm the boy might have taken. Indeed, he caught himself thinking that he knew very little whatever of his son, but he distinctly remembered an unsatisfied, dough-faced youth who took delight in calling down the old man and reducing his mother to tears, such a person as adds to the gaiety of public rooms and hotel piazzas, where the ingenuous young of the wealthy play with or revile the bell-boys. But this well-set-up fisher youth did not wriggle, looked at him with eyes steady, clear, and unflinching, and spoke in a tone distinctly, even startlingly, respectful. There was that in his voice, too, which seemed to promise that the change might be permanent, and that the new Harvey had come to stay. "Some one's been coercing him," thought Cheyne. "Now Constance would never have allowed that. Don't see as Europe could have done it any better." "But why didn't you tell this man Troop who you were?" the mother repeated, when Harvey had expanded his story at least twice. "Disko Troop, dear. The best man that ever walked a deck. I don't care who the next is." "Why didn't you tell him to put you ashore? You know papa would have made it up to him 10 times over." "I know it, but he thought I was crazy. I'm afraid I called him a thief because I couldn't find the bills in my pocket." "A sailor found them by the flagstaff that night," sobbed Mrs. Cheyne. "That explains it, then. I don't blame Troop any. I just said I wouldn't work on a banker, too. And of course he hit me on the nose, and oh, I bled like a stuck hog." "My poor darling! They must have abused you horribly." "Dunno quite. Well, after that I saw a light." Cheyne slapped his leg and chuckled. This was going to be a boy after his own hungry heart. He had never seen precisely that twinkle in Harvey's eye before. "And the old man gave me 10.5 a month. He's paid me half now, and I took hold with Dan and pitched right in. I can't do a man's work yet, but I can handle a dory most as well as Dan, and I don't get rattled in a fog much, and I can take my trick in light winds that's steering, dear and I can most bait up a trawl, and I know my ropes, of course,
and I can pitch fish till the cows come home, and I'm great on old Josephus, and I'll show you how I can clear coffee with a piece of fish skin, and I think I'll have another cup, please. Say, you've no notion what a heap of work there is in 10½ a month." "I began with 8½, my son," said Cheyne. "That's so. You never told me, sir." "You never asked, Harve. I'll tell you about it some day, if you care to listen. Try a stuffed olive." "Troop says the most interesting thing in the world is to find out how the next man gets his victuals. It's great to have a trimmed up meal again. We were well fed, though. Best mug on the Banks. Disko fed us first class. He's a great man. And Dan, that's his son, Dan's my partner. And there's Uncle Salters and his manures, and he reads Josephus. He's sure I'm crazy yet. And there's poor little Penn, and he is crazy. You mustn't talk to him about Johnstown because you must know Tom Platt and Long Jack and Manuel. Manuel saved my life. I'm sorry he's a Portuguese. He can't talk much, but he's an everlasting musician. He found me stuck adrift and drifting, and hauled me in." "I wonder your nervous system isn't completely wrecked," said Mrs. Cheyne. "What for, Mama? I worked like a horse, and I ate like a hog, and I slept like a dead man." That was too much for Mrs. Cheyne, who began to think of her visions of a corpse rocking on the salty seas. She went to her stateroom, and Harvey curled up beside his father, explaining his indebtedness. "You can depend upon me to do everything I can for the crowd, Harve. They seem to be good men on your showing." "Best in the fleet, sir. Ask at Gloucester," said Harvey. "But Disko believes still. He's cured me of being crazy. Dan's the only one I've let on to about you, and our private cars and all the rest of it, and I'm not quite sure Dan believes. I want to paralyze him to-morrow. Say, can't we run the Constance over to Gloucester? Mama don't look fit to be moved, anyway, and we're bound to finish cleaning out by to-morrow. Wouverman takes our fish. You see, we're first off the Banks this season, and it's $4.25 a quintal. We held out till he paid it. They want it quick." "You mean you'll have to work to-morrow, then?" "I told Troop I would. I'm on the scales. I've brought the tallies with me." He looked at the greasy notebook with an air of importance that made his father choke. "There isn't but 2.94 or 5 quintal more by my reckoning." "Hire a substitute," suggested Cheyne, to see what Harvey would say. "Can't, sir. I'm tallyman for the schooner. Troop says I've a better head for figures than Dan. Troop's a mighty just man." "Well, suppose I don't move the Constance to night, how'll you fix it?" Harvey looked at the clock, which marked 20 past 11. "Then I'll sleep here till 3 and catch the 4 o'clock freight. They'll let us men from the fleet ride free, as a rule." "That's a notion. But I think we can get the Constance around about as soon as your men's freight. Better go to bed now." Harvey spread himself on the sofa, kicked off his boots, and was asleep before his father could shade the electrics. Cheyne sat watching the young face under the shadow of the arm thrown over his forehead, and among many things that occurred to him was the notion that he might perhaps have been neglectful as a father. "One never knows when one's taking one's biggest risks," he said. "It might have been worse than drowning, but I don't think it has. If it hasn't, I haven't enough to pay Troop, that's all. And I don't think it has." Morning brought a fresh sea breeze through the windows. The Constance was sidetracked among freight cars at Gloucester, and Harvey had gone to his business. "Then he'll fall overboard again and be drowned," the mother said bitterly. "We'll go and look, ready to throw him a rope in case. You've never seen him working for his bread," said the father. "What nonsense! As if any one expected—" "Well, the man that hired him did. He's about right, too." They went down between the stores full of fishermen's oilskins to Wouverman's wharf,
where the We're Here rode high,